Hello, thank you for joining me for this reflection on a passage from John's Gospel from St Margaret and St James's churches in the Diocese of Leeds. If you haven't yet done so, you might find it helpful to listen to my colleague Father Robert reading the passage itself from John chapter 10, verses 1 to 10. There's a story in the Old Testament where the great hero of the Hebrew people, Moses, comes across a burning bush. Moses hears the voice of God speaking to him from the bush. The voice tells him to go back to his people and tell them that they're going to be rescued from slavery in Egypt. Now, this was a time when it was believed that there were many gods in the world, and so Moses asks the voice, quite reasonably, "What's your name? Who shall I tell my people has sent me?" The voice answers rather enigmatically, "I am who I am. Thus you shall say to the Israelites, I am has sent you." This may not seem altogether helpful, but I think the point is this: human beings want to try to pin God down, to define him, to say he's a judge, or a father, or a friend, or a warrior. What the voice is saying to Moses is this: don't try to pin me down, don't try to stereotype me, just get to know me at first hand. Come to know me with your heart. Do not worry about knowing about me with your head. All I will tell you about myself is this: I am. Now, according to John's Gospel, there are at least 9 occasions when Jesus presents a little picture of himself, beginning in every case with these words, I am. To us, these words might seem insignificant, but to the Jewish people 2,000 years ago, they would have been like setting light to tinder. It was as if Jesus was claiming to be God. In fact, he was claiming to be God, and it's small wonder that they crucified him. And if we move on to some of the images that follow, we find that some of them are very famous, some of them are very concrete. I am the light of the world. I am the good shepherd. Some are more abstract. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the resurrection. And some seem just a little bit odd, like today's picture. I am the gate of the sheepfold. But it starts to make a bit more sense if we know something about sheepfolds in Jesus' time. Now, if we were to go just a few miles north of Leeds or Bradford, we'd find sheepfolds, small fields enclosed by dry stone where sheep can be gathered together. And somewhere in the dry stone wall will be a gap, and the gap will be filled with a gate, perhaps a 5-bar gate of wood, or more likely these days, a lightweight steel one. Probably the sheepfolds in Jesus' day were not very different, except for one thing: there were no gates. There was a gateway, but no gates. And the sheepfold was sealed by the shepherd who lay down in the gateway. He was quite literally the gate. And one purpose of this was to prevent the sheep getting out, but the other purpose was to prevent the wolves getting in. There are no wolves left in Britain now, but we still talk about a wolf in sheep's clothing, and we know exactly what we mean. But Jesus also speaks about thieves and bandits. Inevitably, thieves and bandits climb into the sheepfold over the wall. They don't enter by the proper gateway. And we know this from everything else that Jesus says, that by thieves and bandits, he means the religious leaders of his day. So he's drawing a contrast between himself and the religious establishment. And the message is clear: don't trust them, trust me. So why should we trust Jesus? Well, first, because he's God. There's a sense in which Jesus is controlling the course of the world. He is controlling the course of your life and my life. This may not always be evident. There are undoubtedly times, none more so than at present, when life seems confused or meaningless or out of control. But at the heart of the Christian faith is the conviction that God in Christ is present in every event. Second, we should trust Jesus because he died for us. As God, Jesus Christ could have stood aloof from all the suffering in the world. He could have offered empathy from afar, but he chose another path. He chose to become human. He chose to be rejected, scorned, whipped, and executed as a rebel. That was a sign of his love. So when we believe that Jesus is present in every event, it is not always as the one who seems to be in charge. Very often it is the one who suffers. He walks with us, and that gives him a real authority. So often we think that authority comes with holding a gun or a truncheon or a rule book. Jesus' authority is not like that. Jesus' authority comes from carrying a cross. His great complaint against the religious leaders of his time was that they were hypocrites. They made rules for the people to follow, but they did not keep those rules themselves, and as a result they had no authority. In my book, being willing to die for me is the greatest possible authority. So if we should trust Jesus, what should we trust him to do? Well, whatever we need. But what we need is not necessarily what we think we desire. But specifically at this time, we might want to trust Christ to care for those who have died. If we pursue the image of a sheepfold, perhaps we might see them all as sheep gathered into the sheepfold until the day of the resurrection, protected by Christ against wolves, thieves and bandits. But we trust him too to care for those who live on. Life after coronavirus will be very different. It is quite likely that in 6 months' time, many of us, especially those who are old, will still be going out very little. And when we do, we will be very cautious about close physical contact. And some of us will find that very hard to deal with emotionally. So where is God in all this? I believe he's with us in our suffering and loneliness. St. Paul writes to the church in Rome of a whole universe struggling with the fact that things are not as they should be. He writes this: I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory about to be revealed to us. We know that the whole creation has been groaning in labour pains until now, and not only the creation, but we ourselves. We know that all things work together for good for those who love God, who are called according to his purpose. It's a striking image, the whole creation groaning in labour pains, but it helps us to understand that the confusion of the present time has a purpose, and that God is working to bring that purpose about. But let us go back to the image with which we began, that of the sheep and the shepherd. Jesus gives us a beautiful picture of the relationship between the shepherd and the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep hear his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he's brought them out, all his own, he goes ahead of them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. That shepherd is Jesus, and we are the sheep. And whether we're separated by death or by social distancing, to Jesus we are all one flock. We are united in that we all know and follow the voice of Jesus. We are We have one shepherd. We are one flock. Thank you very much for joining me. If you're new and you've never visited St James or St Margaret's, you're very welcome to get in touch. All our contact details you can find on our Facebook pages or indeed on our web pages. Thank you very much.